And CEO, Desmond Wiggin, Jr.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Desmond Wiggin, and it is truly an honor to be before you today. I am a proud representative of Charlotte, the city of Charlotte, because this is the city that raised me, it's where I raised my family, and it's where I founded my company. I owe much to my family as a first-generation American with roots in Jamaica. My parents sacrificed their careers to provide opportunities for me and my younger brother for time here in the States, instilling values to work hard and persevere, which I still hold with me today. I am also a proud husband and father, dedicated to my lovely wife that's in the audience, AKA my co-founder, and my 2 young children. I'm also a graduate of the Winston-Salem State University, Ram Pride, and also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But today, I stand before you as the CEO and founder of Battery Exchange, a startup committed to creating equitable access to connected technologies. Our mission is to be at the intersection of mobile energy, information, and resources for citizens and organizations alike. In fact, we actually have our product at Johnson C. Smith University, offering students energy, but also career opportunities and internships with our corporate partners. See, Charlotte is not just home, it's my foundation for my entrepreneurial journey. Cities like Charlotte across the United States are emerging powerhouses bursting with potential. And I am thrilled about the opportunity to have intergenerational wealth in these communities. As someone who confronts entrepreneurship and the landscape of entrepreneurship head on, I know firsthand the difficulties of raising capital and building an organization. Witnessing the rulings against organizations such as like the Fairless Fund, who is fighting for equitable access, is disheartening. Those efforts underscore the importance of Vice President Kamala Harris's work and the initiatives like the SSBCI. I'm thankful to be awarded the funding opportunity through the HBCU Founder Initiative on behalf of NextCubed and the NC Rural Institution. Vice President Harris's leadership in securing funding for founders like myself is not just a policy effort, it's a lifeline to entrepreneurs like myself, striving to create dreams and make them reality. Vice President Harris inspires me with her unwavering commitment to creating opportunities for underrepresented communities. She fights tirelessly to ensure that entrepreneurs like myself, regardless of their background, have the resources they need to succeed. Her vision and dedication are the setting foundation for a more equitable environment. I'm thankful for this opportunity to talk about myself, my organization, and the capital impact towards entrepreneurial growth. But now, what you guys are all waiting for, we're going to get into a riveting conversation about the amazing work that's happening with the Economic Opportunity Tour. First, I would like to introduce Bakari T. Sellers, and Bakari is a politician, an attorney, a political commentator, and he served South Carolina House of Representatives for the 90th District from 2006 to 2014, and we're so glad to have him with us today. Next up, you guys might know this name, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Ealy, actor and activist. You may know this gentleman from movies like Barbershop, Too Fast, Too Furious, Takers, and literally I can go on and on. We're excited to have you as well. And now, without further ado, it is my distinct honor to introduce the first woman to be elected as Vice President for the United States Miss Kamala Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed. Can we please applaud Desmond as he walks off the stage? I have to say, Desmond, you are just an absolute model of what this tour is about. And everything that you said about yourself, your upbringing, but also what you have done in terms of the young leaders that are leading in this effort, combining things like technology with long-standing needs of communities. You really are doing an extraordinary job. Thank you for being such a big part of this.
And thank you. Please give the Vice President of the United States of America another round of applause. We always love having you down south with us. And before I begin, I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And I always tell people my mom and dad say the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. And there are 2 people I have to acknowledge before we begin. One is one of the greatest mayors in the United States of America, Vi Lyles. Please give her a round of applause. And the governor of North Carolina, but give him a round of applause anyway. I think he might have slid out.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I enjoy about just being in your space, Madam Vice President, is that you're very intentional and you're very purposeful. And you've traveled across the country and met voters and met students in particular where they were and meeting people where they are. And you've led the fight for reproductive rights. You've challenged and talked about ending gun violence, and now you're on this economic opportunity tour. I think the first question we have to ask is why this tour, why now?
Thank you, Bakari, and thank you for your leadership and always using your voice in such a courageous and important way. And Michael, thank you. He's just been on the road with me for different events. Why this tour? Well, most importantly, it's because I feel very strongly that we need to be in the community, listening, and giving people information about the work that we have done that will help folks. Because I'm very aware that, you know, we can do all this good stuff in Washington, D.C., but if it doesn't hit the streets, it doesn't matter. So I'm on this tour to travel our country and describe what we have done with the full intention that the opinion leaders, the civic leaders, the community leaders that are here will help us get the word out so that people can take advantage of what is available to help them. And in particular, on the issue of, for this tour, economic opportunity. So the tour is designed, and what I've been talking about are 2 things in particular. The obstacles that exist that get in the way of people achieving their dreams around their economic future, intergenerational wealth. Desmond talked about that. To talk about the obstacles that exist that often are no fault of the individual, but that are systemic and that we are working to bypass. And then also to explain to folks the opportunities that are available. So today we'll talk about obstacles like debt, a big issue that holds people back. We're going to talk about the opportunities that are available, such as access to capital, federal government contracts that can infuse communities and entrepreneurs and individuals with the resources that they need and that they rightly earn but don't have access to otherwise. So that's the purpose of the tour. I believe very strongly that the accomplishments of our administration, such as creating 15 million new jobs, creating over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, historic low unemployment, in particular for the Black community, are very important, critically important. And that is not to the exclusion of also understanding we have extraordinary capacity and leaders in the community who have incredible ideas, who are entrepreneurial, who are ambitious, who have aspirations that, yes, are about making sure that everyone is employed, but also the creation of wealth. To aspire to create wealth is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. If that is what one chooses. I, on the other hand, have chosen to live a life of public service. But I am all for any of you. Get yours if that's what you want, right?
We trying. We definitely
And so that's what this tour is about.
You know, Madam Vice President, the greatest accomplishment in my life is getting Ellen Rucker Sellers to say yes, and I do.
And she is here. Where is she? There,
she's
you are
also,
a saint.
Oh, now she's a saint. Okay.
Yeah, she's a saint.
But she's also a small business owner, and I see what she goes through with Rucker Roots and trying to make sure that her business excels.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talk about often is access to capital for entrepreneurship and small businesses.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been very important to you and the President of the United States. Tell us more about this work and why is it so important to be able to get these small businesses their access to capital?
So let's start with the point that Ellen knows well, which is that not everyone has access to the capital that is necessary to start up a business. But it is not for lack of a good idea. It is not for lack of incredible work ethic. It is not for lack of the ambition to actually create something that will not only benefit oneself or their family, but also the community at large. And so the focus of my work since my days in the Senate has been to expand access to capital, and in particular to do that through community banks. Because community banks are self-defined. They are situated in the community. They are run and by folks who know the community, know the capacity of the community, know the mores of the community, know the needs of the community, and are then able to give the kind of assistance that is about loans, but also about helping folks with financial literacy, helping folks learn how to run a payroll, how to deal with business taxes. Because many of us, we didn't grow up learning that in our household, and we don't really teach that in school. And so, but it's not for lack of anyone's ability to learn it if there are resources that can teach it. So community banks have been my focus. When I was in the Senate, we got over $12 billion more into community banks. And since I've been vice president, we have partnered with the big banks and also technology companies to, as of now, I created a thing called the Economic Opportunity Council, partnering with tech companies, foundations, and big banks. And now we're getting over $3 billion more into our community banks to create access to capital. And what that means is that we also then, working out of these community banks, get the word out on the street. Bakari, Michael, one of the things that's really interesting, the numbers I have are that black entrepreneurs are 3 times less likely to apply for small business loans. And one of the main reasons why is because folks don't want to be disappointed. We know what that's like. It takes a lot to put yourself out there and to believe that you will be taken seriously and treated fairly. And so that's another issue that we are addressing with this tour and the work we're doing through community banks, is knowing you are welcome and you have a place where you can go that will treat you fairly and with respect and with the dignity that you so rightly deserve.
Madam Vice President, it's an honor to be here with you today. I think this tour is such a great idea, and I think just it's working, one. And two, I think it's always great for the people to hear directly from you what is happening, what is being done. I know an important issue for you is housing.
Yes.
And I know it's been an important issue for you throughout your career. Being in California the last 20 plus years, I know how much work you've done there. I know it's at the forefront for you. It was at the forefront for you there. It's at the forefront for you now in this administration. The question I have is, it's a priority. So what is the administration doing to help ease the burden of home ownership right now?
So let's start, as you know, Michael, and we've talked about this before. Home ownership is one of the best ways to achieve intergenerational wealth.
Correct.
Right? So, and let's think about it this way. When you are able to buy a home, obviously for most of us with a mortgage, but when you are able to have a home that is yours, that you own, you accrue capital, right? And that means that when your child says, you know, okay, now everybody, I think everybody in North Carolina can handle this. When your child says you want to go to Howard University, I couldn't help myself.
We know.
When their child says, I want to go to a HBCU such as the one that we are so privileged to be in right now, you can say, honey, you don't have to take out that loan. I'll take some equity out of the home. You don't have to take out a loan. I'll take some equity out of the house to help you pay that tuition. Or if your child says, I want to start a business, you can say, honey, I can take some equity out of the home and help you with some startup capital. Home ownership is one of the best ways that we achieve intergenerational wealth. We also know that it is one of the many issues where we have seen incredible obstacles for black families. We don't even need to go as far back as nobody got the 20 acres and a mule. Let's go to the fact that we recently celebrated D-Day. And we rightly celebrated what we have called the greatest generation. Well, there was a public policy, rightly in our country, that said about that greatest generation, you have brought stability to the world. You, as American military members, most of whom are men, you have served your country and the world with such dignity, to such great result. So we want to invest and reward you. And the federal policy then was to give them loans to help them buy homes. And as we know, we had plenty of black servicemen who served in World War II, but because of discriminatory practices in terms of how those loans were given out, did not receive the benefit of that boost that occurred in our country to help people achieve wealth. So there were pre-existing disparities, and then you had this boost. You think about it in terms of the history of redlining. Yeah. You think about it in the history of what was called a whole federal policy around urban renewal, which basically resulted in freeways cutting through black communities and other communities of color, thereby dividing up communities around what otherwise were thriving commerce communities. So what we have been doing as an administration to deal with this issue is to, one, acknowledge the truth about the disparities, and to seek out and identify the disparities and the built-in systems that still exist that create those obstacles to home ownership. And I'm going to talk about one in particular, racial bias in home appraisals.
Yeah.
So we decided to take that on. Many of you may know the stories about a black family that wants to sell their home and then has the appraiser come in, and the house is appraised for what they know is less than its value. And you probably know the stories about how they'll then reach out to family friends who are white and say, hey, will you all come over, bring your family pictures? We're going to take down ours, and you invite the appraiser. And the home appraises for higher value. So one of the issues that we are taking on is this issue, and are now requiring that appraisers have racial bias training before they are able to do this work. We are also giving for people who are the first generation in their family to seek to buy a home, $25,000 grants for startup capital to actually be able to pay down on home ownership. $25,000 if you are first, or you are the generation that is the first in your family to be able to buy a home. The other thing we are doing is for a certain tranche of folks, helping them first-time homeowners, $400 a month in credits toward paying your mortgage. And these issues are exactly the kind of issues that when you address them, make a huge difference in terms of who's able to buy a home. And that matters. And you know, listen, you probably are sensing from the things that I'm describing, we have been taking a critical look at those specific pieces of the system that have long gone overlooked, that are, you know, that the story about the princess and the pea, that seemingly small thing that makes all the difference, these specific aspects of the system that have kept people from achieving their dreams. Another issue that we have been dealing with is federal contracts. So if you get a federal contract, being very frank, unless you mess it up, it's yours for life. But what we know is that when you're talking about black entrepreneurs, black small business owners, less likely to have the relationships or know the process for applying for a federal contract. When President Biden and I came in, we committed to increase federal contracts to minority-owned businesses by 50%, and we're on track to get that done by the end of 2025. Part of this tour is to create information and available to everyone here to know how you go about applying for federal contracts and which federal contracts are up. Because remember, we also came in and are finally fixing the infrastructure problem in America. You know, somebody talked about Infrastructure Week, which never happened. We actually got it done. Think about the number of contracts, federal contracts, based on the money we are putting literally on the streets of America to upgrade our sidewalks and our bridges and our freeways. Do you know that the 90% of construction companies employ 20 or fewer people? Those are small businesses. And then we have all this federal work that is happening around construction work. We've passed the Inflation Reduction Act. We're putting, by my estimate, $1 trillion on the streets of America in the next 10 years to deal with the extreme climate occurrences, adaptation, resilience, investing in a clean energy economy. Those are federal contracts. So when we make a commitment to increase by 50% federal contracts going to minority-owned businesses, think about what that can mean in terms of a boost to communities around the creation and sustaining of wealth and wealth generating businesses.
Wow. It's amazing to hear it directly from her, isn't it? It's just amazing. One of the things you brought up when we first sat down was you talked about how debt is affecting people, whether it be student loans or medical debt. How do you feel like the administration what is the administration doing to help kind of address these obstacles? And, you know, how can we move forward?
Right. So debt is probably one of the biggest issues that holds people back in our country. And we decided to take it on because, you know, our philosophy is that we want people to not just be able to get by, but get ahead. And debt is one of those things that holds people back from getting ahead. So we decided to take on, for example, the issue of student loan debt. I will say that here at this incredible HBCU, one of the things we know is that black students are more likely to be Pell Grant recipients and take out student loans and endure for years, if not decades, student loan debt. And what that does to then hold back their ability to aspire to have a family, buy a home. So we decided to take it on, and not without great opposition from people in Washington, D.C. Let's be clear about that. They didn't want this. They said, well, I got mine, you should be able to do yours. Instead of taking into account, again, what we have already discussed in terms of where people start. Not everybody starts out on the same base. Correct. Right? And that's part of our mentality in thinking about this. So we have now forgiven over $160 billion in student loan debt, benefiting about 5 million people. I have met just today people who have had their student loan debt forgiven. Please testify. And what it has meant, for example, we've also doubled the amount of student loan debt that we have forgiven for public servants, such as firefighters, nurses, teachers. God knows we don't pay them enough as it is. So this has been a game changer for so many. I've met now a number of teachers, for example, who came up to me with tears about how for decades they've been living with tens, if not as much as hundreds of thousands of student loan debt, but they loved teaching so much that they would not leave the profession, but they would tell me about other teachers who just couldn't afford, with those salaries being so low, and that debt, to get by. So again, it's not only about our accomplishments on the issue of the creation of wealth, it's equally important, Bakari and Michael, to understand why. You gotta see people and understand that people have many facets to their life. And when people work hard and do good work, the system should reward that, right? Medical debt. So medical debt. Medical debt, for the most part, comes about because of a medical emergency for the majority of people, which means what? Wasn't planned. Nobody asks to be sick or experience a medical debt. It's not something people bring upon themselves. And it can result in, again, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt as a result of that medical emergency. And forever until now, that could count against your credit score. Your credit score is supposed to be a measure of, are you financially responsible? Why would we say that medical debt is a measure of whether you're financially responsible? That doesn't make any sense, and it's not right. So we have now made it so that medical debt cannot be a part in calculating your credit score. And you know, now because there's so many apps, most people know their credit score like you know how much you weigh, right? And you know what that number means in terms of your eligibility for a car loan, home loan, or even just to get an apartment lease. So this is going to be a game changer for so many people. And again, it's about, debt is not just about a financial number. It's about how it weighs on people to keep them back when they're working hard and want to move forward. And so I'm particularly proud of what we've done on medical debt. I must say, as a point of emphasis, because again, to the opinion leaders, I need your help. On the student loan debt piece, please remind people to apply for it and not think that, oh, if I apply, I'm not going to get it. I've met a lot of people who have told me that. I didn't apply for it because I didn't think I'd be eligible. 1. 2, please help get the word out. You are entitled to student loan forgiveness even if you did not graduate. Help us get the word out. Because again, it's about creating public policies that are just logical. So what's the logic in that? Okay, a lot of people drop out because they can't afford to pay tuition.
Yeah.
And before they dropped out, they were taking out student loans. The student loan company ain't saying, well, since you didn't graduate, you don't owe us. So people who had to drop out still owe that debt. So that's why we created the policy to be intentional, Bakari, to be intentional. Even if you didn't graduate, you're eligible.
You know, I'm going to use just a slight bit of personal privilege because you talked about being intentional for this last question. And I think that the White House and yourself have been very intentional about having Michael and I lead this conversation.
Yeah.
And Why I say that is because having black men a part of this conversation is so very important. And we need the individuals who are under the sound of our voice to go out and be apostles of the good news.
Yes.
And so when people ask, what is the White House doing
Yeah.
about black men, you can say that we had a conversation about economic mobility and was very diverse in our thought. And also, I saw some Jack and Jillers earlier today.
Yeah.
I know they're having their convention this week. But this is a room full of, and I hate the word future leaders. I hate that because they're really the leaders of right now.
Yep.
And you're also intentional about doing this at an HBCU. And this institution is one of the greatest HBCUs. Now Michael may not know this, but the greatest HBCU is Morehouse College, but I digress. But what would your advice be?
You do you, Bakari. You do you.
Howard's in the top 10-ish. So what advice would you give this room full of the leaders of right now? Not future leaders, but these young people who are the leaders of this moment that we're in.
The first piece of advice I have is dream with ambition. And never apologize for your ambition. Never apologize for that. It is a good thing to have ambition. I will also say this. I eat no for breakfast. I don't hear no. And many times in your life, you're going to hear no. Someone is going to, maybe even many people say to you, oh, it's not your time. Oh, nobody like you has done that before. Oh, they're not ready for you. Oh, and then I love this next one. Oh, that's going to be hard work. Really? Don't hear that. Don't ever hear that. And I've got a whole lot of advice. The other piece of advice I would offer, so you just open that up. Many times you're going to find whether you are in a boardroom, a meeting room, in a room where you need to pitch, where you're going to be the only one that looks like you in that room. Mm-hmm. And what you must remember, and I'd ask you to look around this room right now, what you must remember is you are never in that room alone. We are all in that room with you, expecting that when you walk in that room, you walk in chin up, shoulders back, understanding the voice and the voices that you carry that are so proud of you being in that room and are applauding your presence in that room. That is critically important. That is critically important. You got to be able to see what can be unburdened by what has been. And never allow yourself to put any barriers on yourself based on other people's limited ability to see who can do what. That's their problem, not yours.
Yes, ma'am. Before you do the rope line, may I ask you for a favor?
Yes.
It's Michael's favor. Can we take a selfie
Yes,
right here? All right,
absolutely.
thank you so much.
Oh, but I do have one more thing. A week from today is Juneteenth. And I would add, so we have decided, and I have issued a call to action. It's our newest federal holiday. I was proud as a member of the United States Senate to sponsor a piece of legislation to make it a holiday. And a lot of people have been wondering of the various ways that traditionally Juneteenth has been celebrated, as now it is a national holiday, how do we do it going forward? And what I'd ask is everyone to consider, in addition to your normal tradition for Juneteenth, think of it as a day of action to register people to vote. Please. Thank you.